Hi, Atlee. So I wanted to go over a few of the issues you're having with the current quiz that is associated with the text letter from Birmingham jail, written by Martin Luther King Jr. So I want to go over the text, a little piece of the text with you. I'm only going to go over a few of the paragraphs and how I want you to read it critically and do some annotations with it. And then I want to go over three of the questions that you missed and how we can think critically, especially when you're looking at a piece of rhetoric, which is what a letter from Birmingham jail is. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And how we read that differently than we read literature. It's an argument. Piece of nonfiction, so we're going to read that a little differently than we do literature. So first we're going to analyze the text. We are going to do a piece, then you will take the techniques I give you and do that with the rest of the text. Then I feel like you will be better prepared to take the quiz, which will have different questions than the last quiz you took. But I want to look at three of the questions you missed to show you kind of what you chose, and then how, if we think critically about the question and we've read the text the way we are supposed to, that how we can better understand the question and answer it correctly. So let's begin with the text itself. Letter from Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King Jr. You would already know a little bit of the historical context. Civil rights movement. This is in 1963. The bus boycotts began in the mid-50s. So Dr. King had been marching and working in the civil rights movement since the mid-50s. Now let's talk about the text itself. Okay, so the text itself is a piece of rhetoric or argument. It is language that is meant to argue a point. There are several elements that we want to make sure and understand and annotate for. Now, since it's a little difficult to annotate digitally, if I were you, I would take notes as you are going through and analyzing the piece. You can copy and paste into Google Docs, and sometimes that can help you. You can make comments and annotate that way, okay? But we're just going to go through this a little bit quickly and annotate as we're reading so that we can understand the questions. So, letter from Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King Jr. This is important. This is your speaker. So it's always important in rhetoric to understand who is the speaker, who's giving the speech, so that then we can try to understand who's his audience, what is his purpose, because his purpose is going to influence his choices. And several of the questions you missed were about the rhetorical choices he made, or the choices he made in his argument. And then whenever we look at rhetorical choices, we look at two elements of the rhetorical choice. What is the choice? That's identification. In most of the quiz questions, they are going ahead and they are identifying it for you. They're telling you what the choice was, such as one of them was allusion, which is when you refer to something either in history, in religion, it can be a biblical allusion. So that is just identifying. And the most important part of the choices are, what is the purpose of the choice? What's the point? What is that choice doing? Because everything in rhetoric has a purpose. The words the speaker uses, the rhetorical choices or the rhetorical devices, which some of them are also literary devices, those choices that speaker makes, there's a reason, what's the purpose. And most of the questions you missed were because you didn't understand really what the purpose of that choice was. So we know our speaker is Martin Luther King Jr. Historical lens is important too. So we see we're in the middle of the heart of the civil rights movement. We're in Birmingham, so we're in Alabama, which was a very a place of extreme racial tension My dear fellow clergyman, this part is important because this is his audience. So who he is writing this letter specifically to are the fellow preachers. Clergy are the people who work in the church, or men, or pastors, people who are working in the church. So clergyman, he is writing to other pastors. So then we have to look at why. What is his purpose? So we want to see who the speaker is, Martin Luther King Jr., who is his audience, other pastors. So there are going to be reasons for connected to his audience, reasons why he makes certain rhetorical choices, okay, or certain choices in his argument. Now, there is usually an overall purpose, like a big main purpose, kind of like we have main claims or main thesis statement, and then we have subclaims. There's usually an overall purpose to the letter, but then they're smaller. They're in sometimes each paragraph, sometimes each sentence, sometimes each choice. There's a specific purpose, and that's where you had some issues with your questions. So let's just look at this paragraph right here. While confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. So his present activities are the marches and the boycotts and the work he's doing in Birmingham, Alabama. Seldom do I pause to answer criticism of my work and ideas. So he's saying most of the time I don't respond to my critics, those who think that I'm unwise and untimely, or that what I'm doing is wrong. If I sought to answer all the criticisms that crossed my desk, my secretaries would have little time for anything other than such correspondence in the course of the day, and I would have no time for constructive work. So really what he's saying here is he has a lot of people against him, and he's not going to answer to all of that because he has a greater purpose. But that little transition word there tells us that he is going to respond to them. Okay, but since I feel you are men of genuine goodwill, so he feels they really do mean well and they're trying to do their best. They just feel that maybe him causing a lot of issues in Birmingham is not the best time to do that. And that your criticisms are sincerely set forth. I want to try to answer your statement in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms. Okay, so he starts out by saying his overall purpose is to explain why he feels that his work in Birmingham, why he's in Birmingham, and why he feels that it is a wise decision and the right time to be here. Okay, and then each of these pieces are going to have a reason or purpose for his argument. I want to look, this paragraph tells exactly, it responds why he's in Birmingham. It gives some factual response. If I studied rhetoric with you, I'd teach you about the rhetorical appeals, which are ethos, logos, and pathos. Logos is a logical appeal. He starts here by logically saying, I work for a group. We are here. I was invited. It says right here, am here because I was invited here. So I didn't just come down here to cause problems. I'm here because I was invited here. So, but the way he says that, one of the choices he makes, he says, so I, along with several members of my staff, am here. So he says, so I am here. Then he repeats, I am here because he is repeating. We know that this little piece, the purpose or whatever he's saying here, is important because he repeats himself. He uses repetition. That's the choice. Why? What's the purpose of that? Well, it's to indicate that he did not come to Birmingham just to cause issues. He is not making unwise choices. He was invited. There's a reason. There's an issue in Birmingham that is bringing him here, and he's here because he needs to be. Okay. And then let's look at this piece right here. But more basically, I'm in Birmingham because injustice is here. Okay, there's real injustice in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. Just as the prophets of the 8th century BC left their villages and carried their "Thus saith the Lord" far beyond the boundaries of their hometowns. Now look, okay, so he's referring to prophets in 8th century BC. He's referring back to a biblical or historical. So he is referring back to prophets of the 8th century. So that is an allusion, Allusion. And you missed 2 questions related to allusions. So there's always a reason or purpose for these choices. So why is he using this allusion? Well, one of the overall reasons why he would use biblical allusion ties back to his audience. He's speaking to pastors and preachers, so they would understand the significance of these situations that Dr. King is pointing out. And just as the Apostle Paul left his village of Tarsus and carried the gospel of Jesus Christ to the four corners of the Greco-Roman world, so am I compelled to carry the gospel of freedom beyond my hometown. Paul had a moral duty to carry the gospel. I have a moral duty to carry the gospel of freedom. Just like Paul, just like the prophets of the 8th century. He is comparing himself and comparing his responsibility. There's a reason why he is alluding to these. First of all, tied to his audience, but second of all, there's a deeper purpose and connecting to his reasons of why he's here. I'm compelled to carry the gospel of freedom, just as prophets and apostles and those who are leaders in the church before, just as they did, so am I. Okay? Like Paul, I must constantly respond to the Macedonian call for aid. He went to Macedonia. Dr. King isn't going to Macedonia, but there is a call for aid. And here, what does Macedonia stand for? Paul was called to Macedonia, but here he's called to Birmingham, and there's a reason why he's coming. So you just have to kind of break down as you're reading, especially when you're looking at rhetoric, what choices are the speaker making? What's the purpose of them? So the identification of the choice, and then what's the purpose? Okay. All right. So now let's look at the questions you missed. Read the excerpt from Letter from Birmingham Jail. So I want you to go back and read that critically again. Let's look at the question. This is a specific piece. In that dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill, 3 men were crucified. Well, we need to know, what happened on Calvary's Hill? That's where Jesus was crucified in the Bible. So this is an allusion. That's the identification part. And in the question, they go ahead and identify it for you. So on Calvary's Hill, 3 men were crucified. We must never forget that all 3 were crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. Okay? So now one of those people was Jesus. The other 2 were for things they did that went above, were extreme acts. They weren't all the same act. They didn't all have the same element, but they were all extreme. Okay, and Dr. King is doing extreme things in Birmingham or in all of the cities that he visits. So our question says, why does King use this allusion? What's the purpose? What is the reasoning behind the allusion? Okay, let's look at our answers. To establish historical precedent for racial tension. Is there anywhere in here that he is talking about racism on Calvary's Hill? Now he talks about extremism, But one of the men was a thief. You have to know a little bit more about that, about exactly what happened about the historical illusion. But even if you don't, if you know what extremism is, that doesn't have to be connected to racism. Okay? So we're not talking about specifically about racial tension here. He is connecting to the extremism, the extreme measures he's having to take, and why did he have to take these measures? So this is incorrect. To commemorate men who have been forgotten. Well, he doesn't say we have to remember these men. He says we must never forget that all three were crucified for the same crime. Why were they crucified? Why? What were they doing? Okay. And mainly, probably the main one he's talking about and referring to is Jesus. What was the reason? His extremism. They said he was wrong, but was he wrong to fight and to do the things that he was doing when he went to place, or why he was crucified? So he's not commemorating these men. He doesn't even mention their names. So that is not the correct answer. To suggest the moral significance of his cause. Now, if you know, one of the men on Calvary's Hill was Jesus, and we know that Dr. King is a pastor. He's the crime of extremism. Jesus was taking extreme measures and doing extreme things that went against what those in power wanted him to do. Dr. King is having to make extreme choices and do extreme things like boycotting, disrupting what has been allowed to happen for so long. He's making extreme decisions and choices. He's having to be extreme. But he's saying, and earlier we looked at another illusion, he has a moral obligation, just like Paul did, just like the prophets did, just as Jesus did. He's not comparing himself to Jesus, but he is comparing his purpose and who he's called by. Yes, more than likely this is our choice, because he is referring to Jesus, who died on Calvary's Hill. So he is connecting the moral significance to Jesus had a moral responsibility to make extreme choices, just like Dr. King does. Let's look at the last one. To forge a connection with foreign countries. That has nothing to do with this piece. We're not talking about, he says Calvary's Hill, but he's not talking about connecting to foreign countries. That has nothing to do. We can definitely rule that out. So our answer, our best choice that we can look at the connection to this illusion is moral significance. And if we break that down and look at every answer, it's going to take you longer. However, you're not going to be repeating this quiz over and over and over again, because you are looking at what rhetorical choice is this question focusing on. It is illusions, and we need to look at why this illusion is chosen and break it down. You can come up with the answer. Okay, let's look at two more that you missed. But such an ordinance becomes unjust when it is used to maintain segregation and to deny citizens the First Amendment privilege of peaceful assembly and protest. Now, an ordinance is a rule or a law. So all of a sudden we know that Dr. King is saying, okay, yes, there's a law, but there's a reason why we need to break. Sometimes there's a reason to break an ordinance because the ordinance is unjust. Okay. And why does he feel like he can break this ordinance? Why does he feel that there is a reason to break the law? Why is it unjust? Because it is maintaining segregation and denying citizens what? Their First Amendment privilege. They have the right to peaceful assembly and protest. They have been given that by the Constitution, and that is part of their American right. Okay, so we're going to look at some words down here. We are talking about First Amendment. We are talking about their right as citizens, their right as an American, that the law or this ordinance is not right, is unjust, and we have the right to fight and protest it because they are infringing on our rights as American citizens. Okay? All right. So we have a responsibility to fight it because normally preachers would be against breaking the law, but Dr. King is saying we have a responsibility to do that because this is infringing on our rights as American citizens. Okay? So why does he use this allusion? And what is the allusion? The allusion is to the Constitution, to the amendments and the rights of citizens. Okay? All right, so let's look. Why does he use the allusion? The identification is it is an allusion. Now we need to look at the analysis portion, or the why. Is he comparing two historic documents? I only see one historic document, which is the Constitution, and looking at the First Amendment. What other... Remember, we are just looking at this one piece that they are highlighting for us. Do you see two documents? No. So we automatically know that's not an answer. To urge patriotic responsibility. Oh, patriotic. Are we talking about the rights of American citizens? Are we talking about America's amendments, America's duty to all of its citizens and giving all citizens the privilege of peaceful assembly and protest? Sure am. Are we talking about the responsibility to uphold our patriotic rights and uphold our beliefs related to America and the patriotic responsibility we have to all citizens? We sure are. We just said that when we analyzed this sentence. So that's probably an answer, but I want to keep going and do my process of elimination. To issue a call for action. He's not issuing the call in this sentence. He's giving reasons. He's saying, but such an ordinance becomes unjust. He's not telling you what to do. He's telling you why we're doing it. The call to action was earlier. This is an explanation of the action. So he's not issuing a call here. That's not his purpose. To state a moral dilemma. Now, he did state moral dilemmas earlier, but this sentence is not talking, we're not talking anything moral here. We're talking about the right to peaceful assembly and protest connected to what our forefathers deemed right for all citizens, because it says to deny citizens, that's all citizens of America. That is connected to patriotic responsibility. That's not moral here. Okay? So our answer is to urge patriotic responsibility. You have to look at what is the question asking connected to the specific text it's giving you in the question, what excerpt, and then why is it used here. And if you take your process of elimination and you think critically, I think you'll be able to answer the question. Okay, one more. Both of those were about illusion. Remember, all of these questions are going to be about pieces of the rhetoric, the author, the purpose, and a lot of them, the audience, a lot of them are going to be about the choices and why are these choices being made. Okay, so gives us another excerpt from the letter. So let's look at this specific excerpt. You suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter. Now he's speaking in second person tense here. However, who is the you? He's giving very specific 6-year-old daughter. So the you here is himself. Okay, he's talking about, this is himself. So you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children. So what is he is giving a specific example of what he's experienced about segregation and racial injustice. Okay, so now let's look at why he gave this specific kind of anecdote, a specific example of what he's gone through. He had to explain to his 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the amusement park. So what is the author's purpose? Remember, that's mainly what we're looking for. What is his reasoning? Because there's these little purposes or reasons for each argument, okay? So what is the author's purpose for including this sentence? To illustrate the cruelty and violence of a segregated South? Well, there was definitely cruelty and violence, but in this specific excerpt, is it violent that she can't go to the amusement park? I agree it's cruel, but here is there like physical cruelty and violence in this excerpt. It was there, but in this excerpt, no. This is not his main reasoning. He could have used lots of other examples of dogs being released, of lynching, of men being, of the KKK burning. All of those examples would have been examples to illustrate cruelty and violence. So that's not the specific purpose here. To emphasize his personal connection to segregation is having your own 6-year-old daughter having to describe why other children can go but she can't. Would that be a reason? Like, he's giving his own reasoning of, here's my personal connection. Now I'm going to give you a little, when I told you about those rhetorical appeals earlier, one of those is ethos, and ethos is the author's personal connection. Why does that author have the right to speak or to give, to argue his point? And Dr. King is saying, I'm not here just fighting for other people. I'm fighting for myself and my own family. I have a personal connection to the segregation of the South, and one of those, I think this appeals to both feeling, which is pathos, emotions. Why is a 6-year-old girl being denied this just because of the color of her skin? But it's also his ethos. I have a connection to this. I have a reason to be here and to fight the social injustice and racial injustice in the South. Okay. Down here, so we know that this is a pretty strong answer, but we need to keep going, okay? To describe the daily struggles of black children. Well, maybe, but I think the main purpose, this is not something you wouldn't daily be kept from amusement parks. So no, that maybe if he was talking about school or something they did on a daily basis, but because I say daily here, that would not be it. To explain the disparity, or disparity is like unequal, of segregated parks. The point here wasn't like there's not a amusement, like they're not segregated in the park. She's just not allowed to go there, okay? And he doesn't compare to the park. He doesn't say, well, there's another park she gets to go to and it's not as good. He's saying, I am also connected to this. So our answer would be to emphasize his personal connection to segregation. All right, so I don't want this video to be too long, but I would like you to go back, reread Letter from Birmingham Jail. Read it from the lens of not just kind of rushing through the words, but look, here's my author, here's his purpose, what are his choices, and why are those choices being made? So that then you can go back and answer the quiz questions more critically, read each question and excerpt carefully, and then go through and ask yourself the questions I've kind of been guiding you through with each answer, and I think you'll be able to come up with the best possible answer. Alright, so after you've watched this video and you read back over, let me know, and I'll let Mr. Sullivan know, and he can answer once he's back on at 7:30 in the morning. Thanks so much, Atlee. Sorry, Mr. Russell. Let me know if you still feel like you have other questions, or if you fail it one more time, we'll need to do a Zoom lesson, and I'll follow you through one-on-one and share my screen with you over Zoom. All right, good luck.